David. Let's talk about what happened. So on Friday, you appeared before the Arkansas State Medical Board. Um, Tell us a little bit about your feelings that day going in. How did you feel going in?
I was glad it was over. I was glad we were getting it done with. It's been a long time dealing with not having told my side of the story, and so being able to finally get uh, some of the information out there that was left out of news reports, the board's information. I was looking forward to going in and kind of telling our side. Uh, they'd wanted us to surrender my license and not even show up. So I felt like, they didn't want the story to be told. So I felt like I had to get in there and tell the story.
Your original attorney was not in court with you. What happened there?
So about 10 days prior to the hearing, he informed me that if I didn't surrender my license, that he didn't feel comfortable attending the hearing, that he'd been forewarned basically that they were going to revoke my license. And I don't think he wanted to be part of that. It was also an issue with finances. I already owed money, and he was going to charge a lot more to be there. I felt a little betrayed by it though, because the deadlines for witnesses and documents and stuff kind of passed, and I kind of had to go in there without some of that stuff because of the last minute decision. So it wasn't ideal, and I don't know entirely what was behind that. It kind of tried to get played to me as like a strategy, but I don't think that's what it was. So it was a little irritating, but again, I couldn't appeal a decision unless I went to the hearing. So if I surrendered, it would be over, and I wouldn't get to tell the story. The women in the video couldn't tell the story, so I felt like I had to go no matter what.
Did you feel prepared going in without having your attorney there?
Well, I know what happened that night very well, obviously, and I had a lot of time to review the board's allegations and statements the investigator gathered from everyone. So I knew the case pretty well backwards and forwards. So I felt like I could go in there and, at least tell my story. I wasn't prepared to be a lawyer in the format and the form I wasn't, familiar with, and knowing what to object to and what not to object to. But I knew the facts. So I felt like I could try to get those out. And with bringing 3 witnesses that have been part of my practice for over 25 years combined, I knew that if they wanted to know anything about what was going on in my clinic or office, I hand delivered them insiders who they could ask anything they wanted to of. And ironically, they didn't ask them anything about what was going on in the clinics. They just rather attacked them rather than even asking, what's really going on. So
Another thing I think that was kind of a setback is you did have an attorney who's representing you in another matter. And he was there with you, and then they didn't allow him.
Yeah, the board attorneys had some conniption about him being able to advise me, and the head of the hearing wasn't sure what the law was. It didn't sound like so they gave me an option: totally do it by myself, or have someone who wasn't as familiar with the case specifically represent me. And continuing the hearing wasn't an option, so I decided to go ahead and represent myself.
All right. Actually, after consulting with Mr. Diffenay, Dr. Diffenay, he is comfortable with representing himself.
All right, sir. Thank you very much.
You want me to step aside?
If you'd be so kind, and just again for the record, I think you may be right in terms of a pretrial situation, but I think the actual trial itself, I've never seen anybody sit on the side and whisper into a pro se client's or a pro se individual's ear what to do. Pre-hearing or pretrial stuff, I think it might be, within the realm. I'm just trying to think on the top of my head, procedures like that, but.
It actually has been done. I've actually done it myself.
Okay, all right.
I was there in the room, and I felt a certain atmosphere when I went in there as soon as the hearing started. What did you feel about that atmosphere in there?
It was obvious to everyone that was there with me, the witnesses, so that they were angry and mad from the get-go. The tone was just, and the body language was just were like, what are you doing here? Like, why'd you show up? The attorneys were very aggressive and angry right from the get-go, just off the bat. It's like I couldn't figure out, well, what's everybody mad at? I mean, this is just a hearing. There shouldn't be any emotion involved in this. So I don't have any prior experiences with any of those doctors. I don't know them personally. The board changed recently, and some of those are new members, and I don't have any personal experience or knowledge with them. Don't know much of their background. The word on the street is that one of the board members that was there um, actually got his CNA, a certified nurse assistant, pregnant that was working for him when he worked at NEA Baptist here in Jonesboro some years ago. Don't know exact facts of that, but it was pretty well known apparently at the time, which is ironic considering the arguments they were trying to make about the balance of power with employees and patients. So
The witnesses for the state, there were two of them. The first one is the gentleman who conducted the investigation when this complaint came in.
Nick Schull in the Office of Pharmacy Services and Drug Control.
What were your dealings with him?
I had about a 3-minute conversation with him on the phone, never met him in person. He had asked me about walking around naked in the clinic, and they made a big deal about my answer to him on the phone.
I informed Dr. Diffenay of the complaint the ASMB received, indicating Dr. Diffenay was walking around the clinic naked and performing sexually inappropriate acts in front of those 3 employees specifically. And Dr. Diffenay indicated, quote, "That's crazy. I don't walk around my clinic naked."
But the thing is, when someone says that, and the way he caged the allegation and the conversation was that I was walking around naked during operating hours, during patient hours. And I was like, that's crazy. I mean, who's going to do that?
I informed Dr. Diffenay the complaint specifically indicated that he masturbated and ejaculated onto patient number 1 while standing in front of employee number 1 and employee number 2. Dr. Diffenay asked, quote, "Who's saying this stuff? What in the world? That's not something I remember at all." I informed Dr. Diffenay at that point that the board had received video clips of those actions. Dr. Diffenay indicated, "I don't know anything about that. I'd have to see those things to have any idea what you're talking about."
They tried to say I had lied to him because I said I wouldn't walk around the clinic naked, and we established that I lived in that office space, and this event took place after hours. I lived there quite frequently back in that time, and girlfriends I had at the time would come stay with me. So that was my living space. That's not what I was referring to when we asked that question. My assumption was he was accusing me of walking around the clinic during clinic hours while we were operating as a clinic naked, and that's what I was objecting to.
There were several times when the board members, the attorney, said, "You're a liar. He has shown that he's lied to this person, to that person, to the investigator." What do you say to that?
Yeah, they made a big deal of that first conversation with the investigator, that blindsided phone call out of nowhere. Another one they made a case about was my conversation with Dr. Diner, not related to this case, but from a case 6 months earlier when we were talking about my naturism being entwined into my clinic practice, which was 6 years after this event happened, and we were discussing, my spiritual religious beliefs about naturism and how that plays in. And I told him, I don't push that on my patients. I don't bring it into the office. And Maggie, one of my witnesses there, had testified that she worked for me for 5 to 6 years before she knew I was a naturist, which kind of confirms that statement. They're saying the fact that I walked around naked in my office after hours 6 years ago made that statement untrue. And I told them I was talking to him in the present tense about what was going on at the time. The complaint was filed in 2024, not about some random event after hours in an apartment I lived in 5 years prior. But they tried to make that out to be like some kind of misrepresentation of that question. And again, stretching things to stretch the interpretation to try to make it seem untrue. The other thing they harped on was some polygraphs I took when I went and got evaluated and treated. And what they failed to mention was that the polygraph questions each time were the same. And I passed the questions before I left, which you have to do before they'll clear you to be fit for practice. So, and Dr. Diner had mentioned that I passed the polygraph. They seemed to just not hear that or didn't care because it wasn't convenient for their story. But it was the same questions and I passed them before I left.
So we're going back to Dr. Diner. That's what we were talking about, and how he was the second witness for the state. Your interactions with him.
So I met with Dr. Diner back almost a year and a half ago when my naturist complaint came up. He interviewed me over the phone. We talked about that stuff. That was the last time I talked to Dr. Diner. I've been dealing with the foundation through the executive director, Rebecca Gaston, who kind of runs everything. So all the handling of the evaluations, the reports, keeping up with my meetings and therapy and all the requirements they gave me to do, all that was managed through Rebecca. Dr. Diner said that, you know, I'd been keeping up with all that and had been in a lot of contact with them, and I stayed after them to get everything, you know, lined up. And so I've been in a contract with them since, well, I guess September of 24. And we did a renewed contract in March after I went and got evaluated outpatient to update after all their findings. So I haven't directly communicated with him until the hearing, but part of the contract is I do my part and they advocate for me with the board to get you back working. It's so that we don't lose physicians unnecessarily if they can be rehabilitated. And his opinion and finding to the board in the hearing was that I was fit for practice and that I could practice safely within the parameters that we had in the contract, and that I was found fit for practice by the facility, and also that they specifically had said that they'd found no evidence that I had groomed female patients for sexual contact.
So your license was not originally suspended until October, but they sent you for evaluation.
So I voluntarily reached out to them and went to go get evaluated on my own. It wasn't mandated by the board. I did that voluntarily, which contradicts what one of the board members was saying, that I hadn't made any effort to do anything, because I was actually doing the one driving all of that, not the board itself. They didn't order or ask me to do any of these things. They didn't even say anything about it. I went and did it on my own, and I worked with the foundation exclusively. So
The Arkansas Medical Foundation.
yes.
Even though they gave one recommendation, the board chose to go against that recommendation.
Which is not only that, it's very, very unusual for them to go against that, but they don't only went against it. They also just stated that it wasn't true. They stated that I could not see patients safely, no matter what parameters were in place, even with a chaperone present and other things like that. I don't know what that looks like, because, you know, keep in mind there's a lot of types of physician jobs. I could be doing chart review in a cubicle somewhere with not doing direct patient care at all, so there would be no concerns there about patient interaction at all. So there's a lot of things that you could do with a medical degree that doesn't involve one-on-one patient care like I was doing in the past, with or without a chaperone. So there were a lot of options, and it's a far stretch to say, even though the experts say I'm fit for practice, that they just disagree because of this video, and this video alone is the reason why they think I could never safely practice, even though the video occurred after hours, not with a current patient, but with a former patient.
And there was a lot of talk about whether she was a current or former patient. Tell me what the scenario was.
So the state brought two witnesses. You mentioned the investigator and Dr. Diner, and then my three witnesses were there. So 4 of the 5 witnesses were there on my behalf. The investigator is there on the state's behalf. I directly questioned the investigator about 2 things.
In July of 2019, would you say she was a concurrent patient or a former patient?
One, did he have any evidence that suggested that patient 1, as we referred to her in the hearing, in the investigation, was a current patient at the time this occurred? And he said there was not.
Perhaps she was a former patient. I mean, it does look like she moved from you to your APRN.
It was proven that she was already seeing another provider at the time this happened, and had already established care with another provider. And he reiterated that in his state testimony. Additionally, I asked him if any of the women had complained of sexual harassment when he interviewed them. And he gave them multiple chances to say that. Again, it's 6 years later. They've had a lot of time to think about that, and they all denied being sexually harassed. And I clarified it with him in the hearing as well. I said, did anyone say that I sexually harassed them? And he said, no, they did not.
Did any of the women say to you, and I know you asked them many different things, did any of them say to you that I sexually harassed them?
No one used that term, no, sir.
Thank you.
So in my mind, the investigator now is a witness for me because he's now refuting their allegations that this person I had the sexual contact with was a current patient at the time that it happened and that these women were sexually harassed. The reason it matters whether she was a current patient at the time has nothing to do with consent. They brought that up like that mattered. It's not about consent. It's about the Medical Practice Act. It says if they're a current patient, you can't have sexual contact. If it's a former patient, you can't have sexual contact if you coerce them into doing it. And she had said in her statement to the investigator that she was not coerced. So there was no basis for that Medical Practice Act to be violated. What the board ultimately ended up deciding was that they had evidence, which I don't see where their evidence was. It was very clear she was no longer my patient. And it's very clear that the women adamantly, including Jasmine, who was there to testify, one of the women from the video saying that none of them were harassed. She wasn't harassed. They weren't harassed. They weren't forced to stay. They weren't asked to stay. They weren't paid to stay. They weren't in any way encouraged to stay. And looking back on it 6 years from now, they still say the same thing.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because you said they weren't forced to stay, but she testified, the young lady, that she was working.
Yeah.
She said that the next day she was going to come in late. This was allowing her to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
So obviously she was working. She was on the clock. She was there in official capacity. I mean, you would acknowledge that, right?
She was not on the clock.
But she was going to get paid for that work.
No, she didn't get paid for that
She
night.
did not get paid for that work.
Yeah. Yeah, she just stayed because she wanted to stay extra and didn't want to do stuff the next day.
So she was going to get 36 hours that week
I believe so. Yeah.
and give you those 4 hours.
Yeah, that's what she testified. I don't remember specifically.
But doesn't that sound a little bogus?
I mean, it's her words.
I'm going back to patient one. As we established just now about she was under another provider's care.
Yeah.
They made comment that that other provider was the other provider, the APRN.
Yes, but for all practical purposes, she's considered a separate provider, and the Medical Practice Act does not designate that as a extension of myself in having another provider who's also licensed seeing them. They asked if she was independent, but that's not a caveat of that Medical Practice Act rule. They can put it in there now and act like it's part of it, but that's not what the rule or law states regarding establishing with another provider.
You mentioned the events leading up to that night, that there had been communication between you and patient one leading up to that night that kind of suggested
Set
that
the
something
stage.
like this
Yeah.
would happen.
Yes. Yeah, we talked about hanging out, and so I mean, it was something we were exploring. She was a friend of mine before I ever saw her as a patient, and like now that I wasn't seeing her as a patient anymore, we talked about, you know, so that was kind of had been discussed prior to this event happening. I mean, I lived there and I was going to be there that night, and that's why she stayed. And I think employee 2 stayed just because she wanted to hang out.
But employee 2 testified on your behalf, as
Correct.
we just brought up. So
yes, I'll say something about that. She reached out to me. I didn't ask her to come testify, just like I didn't ask patient 1 to come testify, because I didn't want to make their life any harder than it already was. And I felt like there was enough evidence to clear the allegations without it. But she had reached out to me and wanted to come testify because she felt it was wrong what was happening. And so, she got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, got her kids squared away with her parents, drove an hour to Jonesboro, rode with us down there to Little Rock, took a day off, all that just to not be misrepresented by the public or the board in what happened that night. She wanted the truth to be known, and she was, had offered to do that. And I was very thankful for that. I thought they would appreciate me bringing someone there that was there who they could ask questions of. But immediately they attempted to shut her down and try to discredit her, while at the same time saying they're doing all this to protect her, which sounds really ironic and hypocritical to me. They talked a lot about the balance of power, which would exist in an employee or patient dynamic. The problem with that is that you need to be aware of that dynamic when there's a case of he said, she said, right? So like if a woman went along with something and there was a power imbalance there, and she said, well, I went along with it, but I felt like I had to, but for all the reasons they were trying to suggest in the hearing. But I wish I hadn't, and I didn't want to. That's where that comes in, where the woman later says, I felt compelled to do this or had to do this. And then that balance of power consideration is given to that woman. In this case, the women weren't saying that. A third party comes in and says, well, you're not aware of the fact that there might have been a balance of power, so you can't even say what you were thinking. You can't even have your own opinion. You can't even say that you weren't harassed. We're going to say you were anyway. And that was really victimizing for her. I mean, she was adamant that she wasn't victimized in this event happening in the first place. She was victimized by the story being released to the public, the video being put out there, her identity being revealed. And then when she went in there to tell her story, they didn't want to hear it. And they told her she couldn't tell her own story because we're going to tell you what happened to you that night. We're going to tell you what this was. And it was very dehumanizing and very, very victimizing for her. I understand the Me Too movement and this attention to this imbalance of power, but you don't get to apply it to someone else and speak for them. And that's entirely what happened in this. They didn't let the women speak for themselves at all, because they wanted it to be, that I made them to do this or somehow, even though that's not what was said by anybody other than my ex-girlfriend who filed the complaint, who knew nothing about the situation. So it's like, I hope that would have cleared that up, and they didn't. They tried to discredit her. They didn't want to hear what one of the women who supposedly, they were trying to protect, was saying about the incident that night. So
There was a lot said about this being an isolated incident, the 1st and only time this has happened with
Right.
employees
right,
present.
right,
There were references to her reaction or to those two employees' reactions.
correct.
She didn't look surprised. She didn't look like it fazed her at all. In fact, conversation was kind of funny around the whole incident.
Right, right.
Have there been other discussions in front of her where she knew something was coming up, where she knew that was going to happen? Or how do you...
I don't know what knew about that night going in there, but I know that the other employee and the patient knew I would be there. They knew I was starting to be a nudist at that time, so I didn't typically wear clothes when I was in my own living space, which that was at the time my own living space after hours. And I mean, I know two of them stayed for that reason. So they were expecting that. I think employee one had a history of going through my phone and looking at some of my adventures in my phone when she had it for other reasons. Testified that she would go through there and talk about or show it or whatever. So she had gone through and seen some of that. So I think that's why they weren't shocked or surprised, because they knew that was going to happen. But it wasn't because it happened all the time or ever. So it was a one-time event. And I mean, I was there plenty of times after hours with a girlfriend or somebody else, that stayed there with me. And, I didn't wear clothes if I was there by myself or whatever. Yeah. It just wasn't a employee, get together or whatever they want to describe that night. It wasn't, it wasn't that type of a setting. So, we were there for 2 hours that night. We maybe had 8 minutes of total video clips. And so to assume that they could gather any kind of intention from that 8 minutes would be ludicrous. There's an hour and 52 minutes that's not documented, and the people that were there are telling them this is what this was. You're using 8 minutes out of 2 hours and saying, no, we disagree with you. I mean, it's silly to think they know more about what happened that night than the actual people that were there, and they talked to everyone that was there. So it's this hand, I guess this is now the international symbol for I'm uncomfortable or something. I don't know. Maybe the light was just reflecting off of things and it was too bright. Who knows?
So let's go back to her in particular, because she's the one who then made the statements to the investigator that, well, yeah, I'd walk in his office and find him masturbating.
Right.
She did indicate, and I quote, he, Dr. Defanay, would do that from time to time. He would walk in his office, he'd be doing that. I asked her to clarify what doing that meant and if that meant masturbating, and employee number one indicated yes.
What do you think that all stemmed from?
Well, we brought that up. She was married at the time, and I don't think her husband knew anything about this event. And I think she was trying to save face with that situation, first of all. Secondly, she said that in her statement to the investigator, she'd left because of drama at the office.
She indicated she left Defanay family practice because there was, quote, too much drama.
That was that she got caught calling in prescriptions in my nurse practitioner's name. And they were calling meds from what we can tell. So she got confronted about that by the nurse practitioner, and she chose to leave due to that, and that was the actual circumstances. So we suspect that some prescriptions had gotten called in my name as well. We just never knew it until this came up and we saw that, because you don't run a list of everything you go out if you don't know what's going out. So if we had the charts, I could look at his record and see if we're both forgetting something, and I did see her at some point. Neither one of us thought I had. And again, the medicines that were supposedly prescribed for her, and this time it was in my name, not the nurse practitioner's name, were medicines she couldn't even take because she was pregnant. So we don't know what was going on there, but we think it's probably the same person that did that. My understanding was she had called some in, and at that time you could call in certain medications without having to actually access the system. So I think that's what happened.
So you mentioned 2016 or 2017, and that I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Was there an ex-wife that was involved in that?
No, there was not, actually. It was turned out to be a competitor in Bono who had filed an anonymous complaint, but then went around bragging about it before I knew about it. So that's how we found out that he was behind it. He had a clinic in a gas station over there in Bono, and I was working as a collaborator for another different clinic. And the day I took over as a collaborator, I got an anonymous complaint that we were prescribing something wrong. And they did an investigation under an anonymous board member's concern, and he had a best friend on the board at the time. And luckily, it was all hogwash, and we were able to prove that. And I did get suspended before they found out, and after the hearing, and they found out we were innocent of that, and there was no evidence of any overprescribing. But that was when I first learned the dark side of medicine and the medical board, and being used by someone else to try to destroy you. Different person that time, but kind of a similar outcome. And in this case, there was at least some concerns with boundaries and stuff with the video, and I took accountability for that. I mean, in the hearing, I said that was a dumb, stupid thing to do, and it was, some lines were blurred as far as them being a patient or an employee, and hanging out with them. Although that isn't a violation of the Medical Practice Act, and it's not illegal, it's just frowned upon. So that I take accountability for. The allegations were more serious than that, and I still feel the evidence wasn't there for the allegations. But at least there was something to this one versus the one in 2017.
I wanted to just circle back real quick. You mentioned about the prescriptions, the unauthorized writing of prescriptions. Were there ever any police reports or anything like that filed on that?
I can't remember. I don't think so. They were called in, and the evidence was at the time, I think we were going to have a hard time trying to prove it. We were pretty confident about it, but I don't believe a police report was filed.
How did you feel walking out of that hearing?
Bullied, and like they didn't care what she thought. Like she didn't have her own voice enough to say like what happened and how she felt about it. And they tried to twist her words around and try to discredit her. Again, at the same time saying she and other patients are the victims they're trying to protect.
Now, your second witness, how did she get involved in this hearing?
Well, I asked her to go, and she had no problem going because she's worked for me for 9 years, and she was there when this event happened. She was there, worked in the rooms with me. She's been the office manager, handled any complaints from we would have had from employees or patients. So she would have been the one that would have known everything that was going on in the clinic. And you know, she wanted to help if she could, you know, because she was upset with the things that were being said, the complaint that was totally made up by my ex, and she felt like people needed to know that those things just weren't true. And so she wanted to, you know, kind of set the record straight. And I hoped they would have utilized that and asked her more questions about, you know, in her in-room experience with me. I mean, just, you know, she's been around me as you know, spent a lot of hours around me over the last 9 years. I didn't force them to go testify. You know, they are all there on their own volition. And so, I mean, and they thought the board wanted to know what happened. I mean, that's why they wanted to go tell the story. They hoped it mattered. And I mean, in one ear and out the other.
Tell me about your third and final witness, because he also made quite an impact there.
Why would you not do that?
I'm married.
That's a good reason. If you weren't married, would you do that?
That's really none of your business.
So is that a yes or no?
Still stick with that's none of your business.
You're not going to answer the question?
Just answered it.
Yeah, so I was really irritated with that. I tried to object because, you know, he had a physical therapy assistant license, I'm guessing from 10 years ago. I wasn't even aware of that. And he was also my boss as a collaborating physician, working with 20 to 30 females over time in his offices and through the lab. And he had direct experience in my interaction with female patients, female employees, and he has the relevance of that is all day long. What the PTA thing had to do with that is nothing. I mean, it's that doesn't change his ability to comment on those things. And again, they didn't ask him anything about that. They just were like, let's find some dirt on him we can to try to make him look bad. And I felt like he handled it well.
Did you feel like there were any members on that board that were sympathetic to your case?
Yeah, so originally, after they decided they had preponderance of evidence, which I still don't understand what their evidence was, they went into the deliberation of the actions they could take. And they talked about how they could do anything they wanted to. They could do nothing, they could do what they ended up doing, but there was a lot of in between. And the chairman of the medical board very quickly said, I don't get to vote, but here's what I would do. And there were some new members on the board. There was about 3 people who were talking about other options, right? And one by one, it was like, well, but here's the problem with that, and here's the problem with that, and here's the problem with that. And then finally, one of them basically said, I don't think there's any way this guy could be safe. There's no way he could be safe to practice. And that just totally threw out everything that was said in that entire hearing. Like there was nothing that made that statement or substantiated that statement in any kind of way. There was, Dr. Diner said something totally different. The evaluation place said something totally different. The witnesses said something totally different. It was like, we're just going to decide you can't be safe to practice around patients or women, I guess, in some degree. And citing this one example from 7 years ago. And I made the point at some point, and they're like, it's been 6 years. And I asked Diner, has there been a problem since this happened? It's like, no, there's no indication. So like, clearly I was safe to practice for the last 6 years. But in their mind, that was just, there was just no way. And again, there's lots of different practice options. I mean, I could have practiced, you know, at home doing chart review. I mean, there's a lot of things you can use a medical license for. It doesn't have to be direct patient care. So to say like there's just no scenario, and because none of this was about patient care, none of this was about, you know, proper care or anything like that. It was about my personal life after hours. Who was there? Who has the right to be there? Who gets to decide, whether it's the medical board or me or the women? Who gets to, you know, decide what we're going to do after hours? And that's what this was about.
So the ones that pushed for revocation, what do you think their hope was? That, hey, you know, in 5 years he's not going to want this, or what do you think?
So revocation is permanent. So in the sense that my license is permanently revoked. I can't reapply for a new license for at least 5 years.
And there's no guarantee, right?
And there's no guarantee they'll give me my license back. And it keeps talking about, I need to prove myself, and I'm not real sure what the last 5 years was if it wasn't proving myself. So I don't know what they want to see from me, not being able to practice medicine. That's going to show them that I can safely practice medicine. I mean, it's a no process. So you can't prove something that you're not going to be allowed to do. So I don't get. It doesn't sound to me like they have any intention of consideration in 5 years. And in 5 years, some of those guys may still be on the board. Some of the terms are 7 years.
This is the first time that it came out that you went to treatment. What did you get out of treatment?
Well, I was going to bring that up. So they go and evaluate you, and it's an outpatient thing where they evaluate you to make sure you're fit for practice, and it's supposed to be 6 weeks long. They can extend it up to 12 weeks if they want to. I went 11 weeks. There was some discussion about whether I stayed long enough or not, but I stayed 5 weeks longer than they had told me I was going to go for originally.
Did you leave early?
I didn't leave early. I left at 11 weeks, and you have to. Of course, they charge you for it. It's $3,000 a week. They didn't take my insurance, so I'm paying cash for this. If you can't pay, you can't stay. And so I got to 11 weeks and then was out of money. And I said, I can't keep paying you. What's our options here? And they had two options. One was say, okay, well, go home. You didn't complete treatment. Come back when you can. Or, yeah, you've done enough. We feel like you're safe to practice. We'll make the recommendations for you to go back. And that's what they chose to do. I wouldn't have gotten recommendations from them at all if they felt like I didn't complete treatment. And they know that.
So the clock is ticking. We're going to go back to what's next. The clock is ticking. You have less than 30 days now.
Yeah, we're looking at it. I don't know all the mechanics of what's appealable and what's not. I mean, I clearly feel like it wasn't a fair hearing into the actual evidence. And if you watch the hearing after mine and compare it to mine, it's a joke. They had a lot of options. They could have, and I feel like with the lack of evidence to support their allegations, they should have rescinded the suspension. I don't think they met the burden of proof, and I don't know when we do the appeal what else considered in that, whether they look at the evidence all over again or if they look at their decision and see if it was supported by some type of evidence enough to make that case. I also feel like there was some discrimination going on because they asked me, one of the questions they asked was I still practicing naturism? And they know, and the treatment facility had also declared that it's, for me, it's a spiritual, religious kind of thing. So asking me if I'm still practicing something that's part of my spiritual beliefs is very discriminatory, very prejudicial. So there may be grounds for an appeal just on that basis, because that's not, it's not against the Medical Practice Act to have certain spiritual beliefs. So I don't know how that would play over either. So we're going to look at these different angles and kind of see what's going on. Yeah, I'll do other things for a living between now and then. I got to clear some things up and look at different careers, because obviously I'm not going to be doing medicine right away. So it's unfortunate because I feel like I had a lot to give to medicine still, and I think most of my patients would agree with that. But it's politics, and it's public perception at this point.
You mentioned accountability, and you mentioned that that your fault in all of these, but I don't think that we talked about that enough. Maybe even from the perspective of a lot of the viewers, because they're hearing a lot
Right.
of everything
Of defense, yeah.
So tell me and tell us, what did you do wrong, and what wouldn't you do again?
Well, I mean, it's just not a good idea to mix business and pleasure, or to mix your profession and pleasure. So even if it's not illegal, even if it's not a Medical Practice Act violation, it's considered a globally a boundaries thing. Even though if you wanted to, you could have a relationship with a former patient if there wasn't any coercion or thing in that. And it's happened. There's lots of instances out there of that happening. But it's still just not a good idea. It raises questions like this, like what's going on. So there was no need for me. I mean, and there's no need for me to treat my employees as patients. I should have made them see somebody else. Although again, that's not illegal either, or a violation of the Medical Practice Act. It's just not good practice. Hanging out naked in the office after hours, even though I was there, that wasn't a smart thing to do. I mean, it was stupid, and I regret doing that, and I wouldn't do it again, obviously. So I mean, yeah, I'm not proud of that decision, of that moment that night. And it was dumb. It was not well thought out. My argument's just been it wasn't harassment. It wasn't a violation of the law. It wasn't a violation of the Medical Practice Act. It was just dumb and stupid. And dumb and stupid isn't something that you necessarily lose your license for. So I'm not. I will never say it was a good idea. I'll never say hell yeah. I'm glad I did all that. Whatever. And I'm not defending my right to do that or any of those things. I'm just saying from the get-go, it was painted in a totally different light without us being able to talk about why, what, and all those kind of things. And that was kind of, that was kind of what I was trying to set straight. And so I think that got lost in okay, he's just not taking accountability for this. I'm not saying I should have done that at all. And I'm not saying that, I'm glad I did it. And I'm not saying it was a good idea. And I'm not saying I certainly would ever do it again. I don't stay overnight in my offices anymore. I could technically. I don't even have offices now, but I could if I had an apartment there. A lot of doctors have done that. But given all this, it's I would make sure there's no reason for someone to be able to twist something around or say something around it. It wasn't good for my career, and it wasn't good for the overall image of the profession, and it just wasn't a smart thing to do.
So we put her name out there as the person who potentially had those videos. We've seen.
We know
the
she
proof.
had them. Yeah.
We've seen the proof
Yeah.
on your phone. So she made a vow to ruin your life.
Yes.
At that point, has she succeeded?
She's ruining my career. Ruining my life is more. It's craziest things have been. I still believe a lot of times things happen for a reason. I believe God has a plan for me, and I'm just kind of leaning into that at this point. It's scary not knowing what that plan is or how or whatever. But a lot of good things have happened that have come out of this. A lot of people who supported me, and just a lot of good experiences, and getting to learn a lot about myself through therapy and stuff like that. Hate that it had to happen this way, but
We'll just have you read the comment, take a couple of seconds to think about it, and respond however you want. Or if you don't want to respond, we'll just keep going, okay? So let's go ahead and start with the first one.
all
You
right.
just read it out, and you don't have to read the name. You can just read the comment.
This viewer said, "No cock in this fight anymore." That's, I guess, a play on the rooster there in the background. That's kind of funny. Not the seriousness of the other issue, but that's kind of funny.
Next one.
Everyone had an opinion, but this behavior happened after hours after closing. His staff apparently was okay with it, but because the video was 2 years old. People say I don't want a doctor like that, but how many people actually know what their doctor does after hours? And that's kind of been my point. Like how far do licensing boards get to go in saying what you do in your private life? I wasn't practicing medicine in this video. I wasn't using my license in this video, so it's after hours. So as a profession, not just ours, but other licensing boards, how much say do they have in what you do in your private life? For example, that rooster out there, someone complained to the medical board about that rooster, and I heard about it during this process, and it's like, why does that matter? What's that got to do with my practicing medicine? So, I agree with that. I think private life is private life. If no one's harmed, it's your private life. 5 years is not enough. Well, I don't know this person or know what they know of the case.
What's the name on that? Do you see the name?
This is David Mosesso.
That's the former publisher of the Jonesboro Sun.
Interesting. Yeah. So I guess he thinks he knows something about the case, or I don't know if he listened to the hearing. I'm sure he didn't talk to any of the women present, but I appreciate his opinion from the sidelines there. Next one is, well, he can always try out for the next Magic Mike movie. Again, funny but not funny, the seriousness of this situation. But yeah, I mean, some of these are funny taken out of these out away from it. And again, because there was no victims in this,
Right.
you know, I think even would laugh at some of these. You know, it's. Am I the only one that thinks he needed better camera? No. Okay, carry on. Again, people are creative. Next one. From what I've seen, they were all cool with it. No one got upset until the videos and their faces were released. Don't guess they wanted their spouses to know that was frosting from a toaster strudel on their scrubs. And I don't know that the women in the video got that upset. I haven't talked to all of them since this happened. I know they were worried about the impact on their lives. But if they were upset, they were upset with the person who stole the video and released it to the public, and to the medical board for releasing the video to the media, and for the media to put their identities all over the world. He treated my dad for 7 years. With his dementia, he had become slightly violent and unpredictable. Speaking about his dad, I'm assuming. So David would walk out to our vehicle and see him. He treated my dad with dignity and respect every single appointment. Let those without sin cast the first stone. I do not agree with or approve of what was seen on video, but he did care for patients, especially when dealing with my dad. I appreciate people who had those kind of comments to say. Ugh, why isn't he naked?
So people were disappointed you weren't naked in our previous interview.
In the interview or the hearing?
The interview.
Okay. Obviously, that wouldn't have gone too well in the hearing.
Gone worse.
They would have allowed me to practice my spiritual beliefs in that setting, but
couldn't have gone much worse, I guess. But you know, what's next?
Just want everyone to know I have a very important opinion regarding this topic. Thank you. And I'm assuming this is the gentleman who works at Gamble Home Furnishings. That was a very clever commercial. They actually run that?
At least online.
Yeah, so they actually used it?
They used it online.
I thought it was hilarious.
By now, you've probably seen the viral videos from a Northeast Arkansas doctor and his response to it on NEAreport.com. Well, my opinion may not be the most popular, but you can come right in here and I'll say it to your face that you can get this Beauty Rest Series 4 mattress for 30% off, and that doesn't even count the other mattresses we've got all over our floor.
I thought he was really going to say something. He had me hooked. Next one. Diffney said that those accounts served a purpose to promote the idea of naturism. I was just out doing normal things that everybody else does just without clothes on. And this person said, no, it's making others participate in your kink without consent. I'm curious if she went to the social media accounts and looked at them, why she did that, if she didn't want to see them, because those accounts weren't my name, and they were directed at people who were interested in naturism, so no one was asked, directed, or told about them. So if she went to go check those out, that by definition is consent, I think, and there's a warning on the Twitter page that said nudity past this point, so people were forewarned. Somebody commented, still a sticky situation. People were funny. Next comment, I guess, related to a comment from the video. I just hope he's staying hydrated. I mean, and people can joke about it because, again, this was taken out of context. I mean, the world invaded mine and those women's privacy. Stole something off my phone. It was a private thing in the privacy of my living quarters after hours, and they want to feel some way about it, and that's okay. But you know, if we can laugh about it, I guess that's fine. But it's, you know, they made way more out of this than there was there. It doesn't matter how the video surfaced, which is not true because there's a crime involved in stealing something off someone's phone. Mr. I hope that didn't happen to you. Nothing changes what the video showed. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine if people had video cameras inserted in other people's private living spaces, they would see all kinds of things that they don't want to see and shouldn't see. And I and the women involved had every reason to expect privacy in that situation. And it was taken from us by an act of revenge porn, which is a federal and state crime. And we filed charges, and we'll see what happens. Next one. Reading this article was a real treat. This guy is trying his best to rationalize warped behavior. It's like a guy saying, "Yes, I killed the guy, but I had a good reason. My victim was O negative blood type. I knew his organs would be donated, and I was at the top of the recipient list for an O negative kidney. So there you go." That's what narcissists do. They rationalize their behavior and point the finger at others. As for the ex-girlfriend, if she's the one who sent the video to the board, there was nothing illegal about it. She was not required to edit out the nudity. Again, he is not familiar with the law. She was obligated to send in the video raw without editing or tampering, which again is not the law. Turning something like that over to a government organization with disciplinary authority is completely appropriate. That's why there were no criminal charges levied against her, and that also is incorrect. And I mean, there's a debate over if a crime was committed. I think there is some validity to that, because I think the evidence in a crime, I think, does supersede some of those. But a non-criminal act does not have that same kind of thing. So the video is protected, and there are all the rights of privacy. And under the new Take It Down Act with Trump, if something's identified as revenge porn, it has to be taken down. We identified it as revenge porn, and KIT feels like it's a public interest, and we're still trying to decide what we're going to do about that. But of course, we disagree that my private life is public interest, but maybe they'll steal something else out of my house and put it on the internet too. Who knows? Okay, so your ex is so upset that you won't take her back. She maliciously shared these videos and made false accusations. Please. I'm still trying to understand in what professional context it would ever be okay to walk around nude in your office in front of your staff and then relieve yourself one of them. I'm not buying it. He's just sad he got caught. Well, we introduced those text messages as evidence at the hearing, so just trust that this did come about because she wanted to get back with me, and I told her no, and she misused these videos out of context. But yes, I am accountable for what I did, and we talked about that, and I'm not saying it was a good thing to do.
Final thoughts.
I don't want people to get the wrong idea that I'm defending everything about this. It's just that there are rights involved in this, and one day maybe this will happen to you. Maybe someone will steal something from you and put it out there, and everybody does it. And it's a very violating, vulnerable thing, and it is what victimized these women, not the actual event. And again, they've already said that. And for everyone to be like, "Oh, we have the right to be involved in this. We have the right to discuss this out in the open and watch it," and like, I didn't ask anybody to watch this ever. I didn't release it to anybody. It got taken from me. And so everybody's upset that they had to see this. Everybody's upset, whatever. That's you went out there and got involved in this. And so it's a very humiliating and very vulnerable thing for everybody involved. And so that gets lost real quick. And I'm not trying to say I'm a victim, but in a lot of senses, me and the women in that video are. It was a private thing. And all this could have been discussed without taking that video and broadcasting it to the world and giving them eyes into the privacy of my living space after hours without their permission or my permission. And so I hope those discussions keep going, however they feel about me. It's me today, it's you tomorrow. At some point this will happen to you, and you'll understand what it feels like to have your bedroom or your living spaces exposed to the world without your consent. It's not a great feeling.